worship. Everyone else can turn in your Bibles to Proverbs 11. Proverbs 11. We've been in this series, Mastering Your Money, for a while now. I'm going to start with this verse, 11, 24, and 25. There is one who scatters, and yet increases all the more. And there is one who withholds what is justly due, and it results only in want. The generous man will be prosperous, and he who waters will himself be watered. You know, we started this series back at the beginning of the month, and we talked about the characteristics of a good money manager. The next Sunday we looked at how to get out of debt. Last week we said your money talks, and if you want to know what you value, check your checkbook, and you can find out real quick. Today I want us to talk about true financial freedom. True financial freedom. All right? How many people would like to retire a millionaire? You know, we've seen the game show, right? Everybody's seen that game show. Not many people become millionaires on that game show. But I want to tell you how to do it, all right? I want to tell you how to become a millionaire, and it's not by being on a game show. Here's how you do it. Hard work, strict attention to duty, absolute honesty, economical living, and the death of a rich relative who leaves you $1 million. That's how you retire a millionaire. You know, our economy in our country runs on credit. Our government works that way, on credit. And the numbers of the national debt are astounding. I can't even fathom what those numbers mean. All right? But we run on credit, which offers instant gratification. And have what you want now mentality. People who choose to live debt-free, and of those people, you may have a mortgage on your house, you may not, okay? But if you choose to live debt-free, you're working to get that mortgage paid off quicker than normally it would be. If you choose to live debt-free, you're in the minority. You're in the minority. But let me tell you what, the benefits of living that way are amazing. Amazing. And so we want to talk about that this morning. Starting with the thought of a benevolent God. Starting with the thought of a benevolent God. Now, the most important reason for living debt-free is because it's biblical. Romans, we've read that verse this month. Owe no one anything except love. Right? It's biblical to live debt-free. We need to understand we are stewards of what God has given us to use while we are on this earth. Stewards in every aspect of life, and especially the way we handle our finances. You see, stewardship is a picture of what our relationship to God ought to be like. God is the owner. We are the managers managers are caretakers of what belongs to God. I hate to tell you. You might have worked a lot of years for a lot of things. You don't own those things. God does. God owns it all. We're just managers or caretakers. So stewardship means that we take care of things according to God's directions and not our wants or our desires. In Luke chapter 16, the first 3 verses, there's this story. There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, "What is this I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be my manager." And the manager said to himself, "What shall I do, since my master's taking the management away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg." Now, the story, of course, goes on a little bit more, but I want us to focus on just those 3 verses, because those verses teach us something important. Life is short, and at the end of it, we're going to have to give account of what we did with God's money. Think about these verses. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers." Or think about this one in 1 Timothy 6, 6 through 8. "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we had food and clothing, with these we will be content." Now, the question comes down to this. Who is the Lord of your life? Who is the Lord of your life? Money or God? You can't serve 2 masters, because you'll love one and hate the other. You have to choose. Who is Lord of your life? Now I want you to think about quickly with me the benefits of being a good steward. First of all, if you are a steward, you are not going to be driven with that thought that I have to keep up with the Joneses. We all know that. You know, the Joneses buy a car, we have to buy a bigger one. The Joneses buy a house, we have to buy a bigger one. You know what? That's crazy. But isn't that our world? But if you're a good steward, you don't have to worry about that. The Joneses go out and buy a house, congratulations. They get a new car, great for you. You know, I'm going to drive my Toyota till it doesn't run any longer, okay? And Franklin knows. He's tried to sell me some more since I bought the last one from him. He's tried, but he knows my philosophy about a car. My philosophy about a car is, once you buy it, you drive it till it won't go no more, because that's the only way you'll get your money out of it. So, you know, I keep nursing that old thing, the one that I like the best, the 2007 Toyota, and it only has 393,000 miles on it. So I'm not even close to the 500,000 mile mark yet. And somebody the other day was telling about one that won $1 million. I said, okay, I'm going to shoot for that one. You know, we don't have to keep up with the Joneses. You know, maybe my car is not the prettiest one. You know why? I don't care. Huh? Yeah, it's easy to find. It's not the prettiest one in a lot, but you know what? It gets me from here to there. And isn't that the purpose of a car? So we don't have to keep up with the Joneses. Impulse buying is curbed if you are a good steward. You know, you go in the store and they got all these things at the counter. Boy, I'd like to have that candy bar. Or I'd like to have that soft drink. And then I think, wait a minute. Why do you need that? Can you justify spending $2 for a 20-ounce soft drink that's going to be gone in no time? See, I have a hard time with that. And so I just pass up that soft drink. I don't need it anyway, because every time I drink one and get on the scales, I weigh 5 pounds more than I did the day before. So, you know, impulse buying is curbed. Budgets can be established. And folks, we all need to have a budget that we live by. It'll keep you out of a lot of trouble if you have a budget. And maybe the best benefit of all being a good steward, a steward sleeps better at night. A steward has less anxiety and worry and lives a more peaceful life. Because a benevolent God blesses us in the most unexpected ways. And if you live the life of stewardship, you understand that out of the clear blue, here comes this blessing that you didn't expect, that you didn't anticipate, what God gave you. And so, being a steward then means that we need a budgeting mindset. A budgeting mindset. Proverbs 22 verse 7 says this: the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the living. Okay? When we live on credit, we put ourselves in slavery. And you know what? When we buy something on credit, we pay more for it than it's worth. Because you know what? You pay all that interest that goes along with it. So you may buy something for $100. And by the time, if you just make the minimum payment, by the time you get finished, it might have cost you $150 or $175, depending on what your interest rate is. When we buy on credit, we pay way more than what something's worth. And so we don't need to buy on credit. We need to wait till we got the money to do it. Now, living debt-free is not easy, okay? I understand that. I mean, I learned the hard way. I'll be honest. I learned the hard way. There was a time, especially when all the kids lived at home, we had lots of credit and we paid way too much stuff, too much money for stuff. But it was the only way we could survive, we thought. But I've read this saying from Dave Ramsey, and it stuck in my head ever since I read it. And it is just good money advice, all right? And Dave Ramsey said, live like no one else. Talking about don't live on credit, cash only, all right? Don't live on credit. Live like no one else, so you can live like no one else. Because if you discipline yourself and you have control over yourself and your finances, when retirement comes, you'll be way better prepared. And you can live like the rich and famous. That's important. So, we have to commit to a budget. Somebody wrote this little poem. The author's unknown, but it says this: budgeting is the thing to do. On that I'm most emphatic. I'm just as broke as I ever was, but now it's systematic. So, think about it. Now, how do you make a budget? How do you make a budget? Well, there are a lot of categories you can probably put in your budget, but let's just talk about these 5 things. All right? First thing to go in your budget, tithes and offerings. Second thing in your budget, fixed costs. The third thing in your budget are your financial goals. The fourth thing in your budget is non-monthly expenses. And the final thing we're going to talk about this morning is flexible spending. Now, if you're self-employed, there are probably a couple other categories we need to throw in there, like taxes. It would be one of those categories, all right? But we're going to deal with these basic 5 this morning because they cover most things, all right? So why these things? And why are they in this order? Why are tithes and offerings at the top of the list? Shouldn't that be at the bottom of the list? No. Should not be at the bottom of the list. Who is supposed to have first place in your life? Y'all can answer that one. God. If God has first place in your life, then shouldn't He come at the top of the list when it comes to spending? Amen. All right? And so, then giving becomes deliberate. You think about it. Because it's a tithe. All right? That simple math. 10%. Simple math. Now, the majority of Christians, the average giving among Christians is 2.5%. If Christians gave the 10%, and the churches handled the 10% biblically, we wouldn't have to worry about welfare. The church could take back that responsibility from the government. And then maybe the government could balance their budget. God has to come first. But then there's fixed costs. I mean, there are certain things you got to pay. You got to pay your rent or your mortgage, right? You got to pay that so you got somewhere to live. You got to pay the electric bill, right? You got to pay the phone bill. You got to pay the taxes on the house. You got to pay the insurance on the house. And most of those things, if you still got your mortgage, the taxes and the insurance are involved in your mortgage. So that makes it a little bit easier for you. Once the mortgage is gone, though, you need to put those things in this list, okay? All right. So, then there are the financial goals. The financial goals is how are you going to maintain your emergency fund? Remember when we were talking about this a few weeks ago? Everybody ought to have at least $1,000 in a savings account so when an emergency comes up, you've got the money to deal with the emergency. You need to have that $1,000 there for that reason. Then you work your way out of debt, right? We talked about the debt snowball effect, how you work your way out of debt. But then that emergency fund, that $1,000 for the emergency fund is just the beginning. Because when you get the emergency fund all put together, there should be anywhere from 3 to 6 months of your salary set aside for emergencies. Like say the company you work for goes out of business and you don't have a job. If you've prepared yourself, you've got 3 to 6 months to find a job. Then you can work on putting that money back in case that happens again. But we have to think about that emergency fund. We have to develop plans for savings. Savings to help the kids go to college. Savings for a retirement fund. Because one day all of us are going to get there, hopefully. and we're going to have to retire, and we're going to have something to live on because Social Security is not enough to do it. So we have to think about all of those things. Then there are those non-monthly expenses that are necessary expenditures. Like about when you go to the doctor. You got to pay the doctor, right? You got to co-pay on your insurance. You got to pay when you go in to see the doctor. Or what about your car insurance? I pay mine quarterly. All right, so it's not a monthly expense, but it's still an expense that's going to come up every quarter. And I don't want to get that shock at the last minute and think, whoa, I got to pay this and I don't have it. So we have to think about all these different kinds of expenses. And then that flexible spending, well, that's entertaining. That's, what if I want to buy a piece of furniture for the house? You already started making plans for that and you put it back. And you've been putting money back. The way that Carl and I make these things work is I've got a stack of envelopes. And what I do, since I get paid weekly, I take all those bills, I divide it by 52, and each week I put aside this amount of money for the light bill. I put aside this amount of money for doctors, this amount of money for medicine, this amount of money for insurance, this amount of money for taxes, and on and on. Let me tell you, folks, that envelope system works. And I suggest anybody, especially young people, I always use this in my marriage counseling, and I suggest young people, you start it. And you're going to say, but I can't, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to get started. But remember what Dave Ramsey said? Live like nobody else so you can live like nobody else. Remember that and put it to work and put it to practice. So when you're putting this all down on paper then, because you need to have it down on paper, you put it all down on paper, you got to understand that your income and your expenses have to balance. You have to have a balance sheet. Now, when you first put this all down on paper, you know what's going to happen? Expenses may very well come out more than your income, and then you've got a problem, right? Because then you have to live on credit, which then means that you got to become a slave to credit. So what you got to do, once you put it all down on paper, you got to go back and you got to work through that. And that's where these 5 categories really help, because you know what's got to be spent. You know what the rent is or the mortgage is. You know what that is. You've got a pretty good idea. Most electric companies put a budget amount for every 6-month period. You've got a pretty good idea what your monthly bill is going to be for your electric bill. I mean, and you go on with your different bills and you list what I've got to have, and then you make another column over here what I'd like to have, but maybe what I could do without. And you keep whittling that down till at least they balance. Now, if you're one of the fortunate people that has more income over here than you got expenses, that doesn't happen to a whole lot of people, because most of us live from paycheck to paycheck. But if you're one of those people, what do you do with the extra money down the bottom? You splurge? No. You work on paying that mortgage off. You work on savings for kids going to college. You work on savings for retirement, whatever. Make your balance sheet balanced. That's important. Now, if you need help putting together a budget, I may recommend 2 things that can help. There's a website, DaveRamsey.com/every dollar. That is a free website to do your budgeting. Okay? Now there's There's a premium version of that website that you can pay for. It does a little bit more than just the budget. But you do the free one, it helps you do your budget. I also recommend the book, Dave Ramsey's book, The Total Money Makeover. Total Money Makeover. And in that, he's got all kinds of budget sheets and how you put everything together and make it work. But everybody needs to go through that exercise and understand you need to make the budget, you need to make it work. Why? Because it brings us to true freedom. True freedom. One of the greatest blessings of stewardship is living debt-free and the blessings it brings. What kind of blessings? First of all, contentment. Contentment brings peace. Contentment is God's answer to greed and covetousness. Contentment. It brings us in that right relationship with God. Philippians 4, 11 and 12. Not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound, and in every circumstance I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. Be content. Be content. The second blessing is a refusal to make hasty financial decisions. In the Proverbs 21 and verse 5, it says this: the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. Don't make a hasty financial decision. Think about it. Can you afford it? That's important. The next blessing is excellence. See, if we're living debt-free, we're setting ourselves to higher standards. We're striving for excellence in every area of our life, knowing that we represent the Heavenly Father. So Peter says in 1 Peter 4:11, whoever speaks is one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves is one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To Him belongs the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen. And finally, being that debt-free steward gives us an increase in our faith. An increase in our faith, because living in this manner teaches us to wait on God and to follow His direction. That's one of our problems so many times. We run ahead of God's time. We need to learn to wait. We need to learn to be patient. And we need to learn to trust God to keep His promises. Because He will bless us in so many ways. So living as stewards, committing to debt-free living, brings out the truth in this passage, in Ephesians chapter 3. Now to Him who is able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the power at work within us, to Him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. I love that verse. Now to Him that's able to do more than all we ask or think. That term think could be translated imagine. And let your imagination run wild, and God can do more than that. God can do more than that. It takes faith, it takes trust, it takes obedience, it takes yielding our life to Jesus. So what about it this morning? Is Jesus Lord of your life? Are you following Him? Are you following His direction? Are you following what His Word says about money? And believe me, it says a lot more than what we've covered this morning about money. If you're here this morning, you have a decision to make with Jesus. Won't you come while we stand and while we sing Amazing Grace with My Chains Is Gone?